Hey Amid Aleph. We're on 5A1 at the Mishnah on the daf. Today is the fifth daf in Masechtas Taanis, and we go further. Till now, we were talking about the mentioning the praise of the power of rain in the second bracha of Shemona Esrei, Mashiv Ruach Hamayir, the wind blows and the rain falls. Now we're going to talk about the bracha, what we say in the ninth bracha of Baruch Aleinu et Shoshana Hazai. Bless us, please, in this year, where we say the same Tal Umoto Levracha, which we're going to say in a few weeks. Say Tal Umoto Levracha. Please bring the dew and the rain for blessing. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Ad Mosai Shoylin is Hagishamim. Until when do we stop requesting for rain in the ninth bracha? Rabbi Yehuda Ad Shiyavar Pesach. Until Pesach is over. So according to this man, Rabbi Yehuda, that means during Chalamoid Pesach, when we daven the regular Shemona Esrei, and we say Baruch Aleinu, we don't say the same baracha, send blessings, but we give the more expansive view of the saying Tal Umat Lebracha, bring the dew and the rain of blessing. Rameir Oimel, Ad Sheyetze Nisan, until the month of Nisan has ended, the entire month, even though I've stopped saying Mashiv Ruach Hamayir Goshem in the second bracha, the praise of power of rain, nonetheless, I still ask for rain until the end of the month. Why? Because we've got a pasuk that says in Yoel, in the Navi Yoel, one of the Trey, also one of the 12 small, as we would call them, the small Nevi'im, the 12 small Nevi'im known as Trey, also the 12. He is one of the 12. Shenema, Vayored Lochem Geshem Moire Umalkoish Berisha. And he made rain fall for you, Yoire Umalkoish, in the first month of Nisan. What is Yoire and Malkoish? The Gemara is going to talk about it a little later, that Yoire is usually the first rains, and Malkoish is usually the last rains. The first rains in Cheshvan, or after Sukkot, and the last rains at the end of Adar. Anyways, but here we have a different case, that in Nisan, which is the end of the rainy season, that's when Yoire, the first rains, actually fell. And so the Gemara is going to talk about this. Amalei Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak, said Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak, Yoire ben Nisan, the rain known as Yoire fell in Nisan. Yoire b'Macheshvenu. Yoire, there's the first rains that fall in Macheshven. To Tanya, because we learned in a Baraisa, Yoire b'Macheshven u'Malkoish b'Nisan. So what does this pasuk mean in Yoel? In the Navi Yoel, that the rain of Yoire and Malkosh, Yoire falls in Macheshven 6 months earlier. Amalei, so Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rav Nachman, Hachi ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. B'yemei Yoel ben Putiel niskayim mikrazu. This pasuk was fulfilled in the days of the Navi Yoel ben Putiel. What happened in the days of Yoel? Klal Yisrael was punished. And there was a 7 year hunger. Rain did not fall for 7 years. There was a 7-year famine. Not only was it a 7-year famine, but 4 of those years, they were even attacked by locusts. So whatever was hanging around was eaten up by the locusts. Because it says in the pasuk, Yeser HaGazam Ochal HaArbe. That which the Gazam locust left over, the Arba locust had eaten. And after 7 years of famine, which included 4 years of a locust plague, HaKadosh Baruch Hu miraculously provided Yoire rain, meaning the first rain that normally falls in Macheshven, he sent it in Nisan to replenish the fields. But normally, Yoire Takali falls in Macheshven. So what was the story back there with Yoel? Isa Shana, in that year, Adar ended, the entire rainy season ended, the entire winter ended, and no rain had fallen. At the end of these 7 years, v'lo yardu gishamim, and no rain fell. Yerdu lehem revia rishayna be'echad b'nisan. The first rain, the Yaira rain, fell for them on the 1st of Nisan. When seeing this rain, Amalehem Navi Yisrael, the Yoel HaNavi, the prophet Yoel then told Klal Yisrael as follows: Tzu'u v'ziru, go and sow your fields. Now the rain started falling for the first time in 7 years, even though it's late. It's in Nisan, not in Macheshvan. Sow your fields. Amrullah, so the people clearly told him, the people who have, some of the people who still have some seeds, a cob of wheat and 2 cobs of barley, should eat it and live. Or are you telling us, we should sow it and die of hunger? Because if we sow it now, who knows how long it's going to take to grow? We may not get any more rain. It may take another year to blossom. In the meantime, we're going to die of hunger. Amalahem, nonetheless, Yoel told them, Apa became Su'u v'ziru, go and sow. Nasalahem Nes, a miracle happened to them. V'niskala lahem mashe bak solenu mashe b'charei namolin. And they discovered the grains in walls and in antholes that the animals had squirreled away. Somehow, those grains, hello, Jeff, we're on 5A1, the right-hand column, telling over the story of what happened in the days of Yoel the prophet, where there was a 7-year famine and within those 7 years, a 4-year locust plague. So they barely had anything left, and nonetheless, Hashem, the rainy season usually starts right after Sukkot in Mar Cheshvan and ends in Adar. That year, no rain fell through the entire winter season, and on the first day of Nisan, the rain began to fall. The first rain, which is known as the Yoira rain, which normally falls in Mar Cheshvan, and by that year it fell the first in Nisan. So Yoel told them to go take whatever seeds they have and go sow them. To which they said, "Do you want us? Shouldn't we eat the seeds and live, as opposed to sow them and die? Because when you sow the stuff, it's going to take a year for it to sprout. In the meantime, we're going to die of hunger." He said, "Nonetheless, go ahead and plant it." Now we're up to there. Nasalahem Nes, a miracle happened. And they discovered grains in the wall and in antholes. The grains that were there that the animals had squirreled away. They got it. So number one, this is called a great nes, even though in fact the seeds were there the whole time. They just had not discovered them. From here we learn, when the time comes for a discovery, that's a miracle. In other words, everything is there. Electricity has always been with us. But there's a time when Edison needed to discover how to harness the electricity. There was a time for Benjamin Franklin to fly a kite with a key on it to get the idea of conductivity, to use that as an example. Quantum physics was always there. It's not new in the creation. It's been discovered. When that discovery happens, bang, recognize it's a miracle. Because for thousands of years, it wasn't discovered. Now is the time for it. Penicillin was always there. It needed to wait till the 1940s to arrive, to be discovered. So that's the first thing you see from this Gemara. Alpha became Yotzeru Nasalahem Nes. A miracle was performed to them. They discovered the grains in the walls and the antholes that the animals had squirreled away. They went and sowed their fields with the seeds that they had on the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th of Nisan. And in the meantime, they lived on the grains that they discovered, that were newly discovered. And a second rainfall fell on the 5th of Nisan. And then within 11 days, from the 5th of Nisan until the 16th of Nisan, i.e. the second day of Pesach. And what happens on the second day of Pesach? In a normal year, the Omer was brought. Remember, the Omer was an offering of the new grains that were offered in the Beis HaMikdash, which were the trigger to allow us to start using Chodosh, which were the trigger to start allowing us to use the new grains that had grown over the previous 6 months. In the case of Yoel, the grains grew to full height from the 5th of Nisan to the 11th of Nisan, in 6 days. And they were able to bring the Omer offering after they had nothing, because everything sprouted with the 2 rains that fell in Nisan. They were able to bring the offering from the new crops on the 16th of Nisan. Nimsa says, we therefore see that grain that normally takes 6 months to grow from Tishrei to Nisan. Gedila grew in 11 days from the 5th of Nisan to the 16th of Nisan. That the Omer offering, which is usually brought from the new grain that had grown over 6 months, which is now on 582, 582, were brought from grains that grew from a period of 11 days. On this generation, which saw the Yoireh fall, the rains of Macheshvan fall in Nisan, and miraculously blossom and completely grow to their full height in 11 days, what we say in Shir HaMalos before benching, before Birchas Hamazon, Hazorim b'dima berina yitzayru. Those who sow with tears will reap with joy, because they sowed with tears because they weren't sure that anything would grow before they died, and they reaped with joy because it grew immediately. And now the Gemara explains the rest of that Shir HaMalos. He who walks along weeping, bearing the container of seed. What does it mean he walks along weeping, bearing the container? Amar Rav Yehuda Shar, we're talking about the ox. Who draws the plow and walks along crying because the ox is starving. But the seeds that he's plowing behind him, that are dropping behind the ox, the grains began immediately growing. When the ox made the U-turn, coming back on the other side of the furrow, he was able to eat from the newly sprouting greens from the seeds that he just planted. The Zehu ba yavai verina, he will return with joy. By noisei alavaisav, what does it mean? Bearing his sheaves. Amar Rav Chisda v'amila v'masnisa tana. Kana zeres shiboiles zasayin. The stalks of the grain, the stalks, measured 1 handbreadth, and the ears of grain measured 2 handbreadths. Look, Rashi, if you look at the wide lines on the bottom of Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines into the wide lines. Shaboile Zarsin, says Rashi, an extraordinary word. Zehu Nes Gadol. This is a great nes, not just a miracle, but a great miracle. What's the great miracle? Mash ain't came derech kol hatavua, because this is not the way of all other grains. Shehikna pi shaloisha v'arbo sheboilis, that normally the stalk is 3 or 4 times the length of the ears of grain. And here it was just the opposite, that the grains would double, the grains with the ears were greater in size by the stalks by a ratio of 2 to 1. Why am I making this point? Because why is this called a Nes Gadol? Because it's not the derech kolatur. This is not the normal, natural way of the way grains grow, which is that they are shorter than the stalks. Where else do we find the language Nes Gadol Haya Sham? A great Nes happened here. In 10 days from now, 11 days from now, is Hanukkah. What is on the dreidel? The Nun Gimel Hey Shin. Nes Gadol Haya Sham. A great miracle happened here. What's the great miracle? That we poured in oil into the menorah, and instead of burning for 1 night, it burned for 8 nights. Oil burns. That's what it's supposed to do. The Nes Gadol is that nature changed and it didn't burn up at its normal speed. It took 8 days to burn. A change in nature. That's a Nes Gadol. To put this another way, what's the other great miracle of Hanukkah? Rabbi miyad miyatim, the many in the hands of the few. We Jews, at the time of the Chashmonaim, discovered the idea of freedom fighters. Of course, in the eyes of the Assyrians, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, right? So we were, of course, the Greeks' terrorists, but in our world, we were the freedom fighters. We were very few, and we taught the world. I'm going to repeat this. We taught the world with the Wiskoria of Hanukkah that dedicated religious freedom fighters can outlast and defeat a world power. If you want to see the lesson learned, see the Taliban in Afghanistan 3 months ago. Okay? And how simply outweighing a superpower, a few hundred, a few thousand people can defeat a great superpower. But that first lesson was taught by us. What makes that the great miracle? Because in the scheme of things, the small do not defeat the big. That's not the way it works. That's not the natural course of warfare. The natural course of warfare is certainly not that way. The North ultimately that he has to take advantage of the one thing that he has that Robert E. Lee does not have, and that is attrition. The North had more men than the South, and that the South could not replace its men. So he could afford to take losses, and the South could not. And that's how in 6 months, in what he called, went straight down the rapid man, right? In 6 months, he had him pinned in Petersburg. So, in short, that is what the Lashon, that's why I wanted to point out, the Lashon of Nes Gadol is when nature itself, the normal scheme, everything it's growing, just like it should. But what happens, the end result, is miraculous. Further, okay? The Gemara says, Amalei Rab Nachman le Rav Yitzchak, we're in the left column of 582. Amalei Rab Nachman le Rav Yitzchak, my diksiv, why does it say? Ki kora Hashem l'rov, v'gam bo ela oretz sheva shonim, for Hashem has proclaimed a famine, and it should also come upon the land for 7 years. The question is, in those 7 years, in the days of Yoel Hanavi, in the days of the prophet Yoel, what did they eat? How did they even make it through 7 years? Amalei, Rabbi Yitzchak answered him, Rabbi Yochanan, this is what Rabbi Yochanan explained. In the first year, they ate what was stored in the house. In the second year, they ate what was in the field, the remnants of last year's harvest and the grains that were left over. In the third year, they ate up all the kosher animals. In the fourth year, they ate the non-kosher animals. In the fifth year, they ate the creepy, crawly things. Shishas, in the sixth year, they ate their children. Obviously, only some of the people did, only those who didn't have any seats. In the 17th, they started eating the flesh of their own arms. To state, what he called, it's fulfilling the pasuk that the Navi Yeshaya said, each man will eat the flesh of his arm. Forgetting the story a second, this is important. We know that there is the unfortunate teichacham, the rebuke that's given in the Torah, the terrible rebuke. It always means that in a generation, there will come a time when the Jewish people will suffer one of these things. A lot of it waited until the Holocaust. Others waited until the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Others, parts of it happened at the end of the first Beis Hamikdash. So on and so forth. It's only after the fact can you look back and say, oh, that pasuk, wow, it came to be. And that's what it is. Being the chosen people comes with great responsibility. And we're called on to be great, to rise to greatness, individually and collectively. And when we don't, we suffer the consequences accordingly. Quite simple. Let's keep going. The Amalei Rav Nachman to Rav Yitzchak. And Rav Nachman said to Rav Yitzchak, my diksiv, b'kirbecha kadosh v'loy avoy be'ir. There is something holy in your midst, and I, Hashem, will not enter the city. That doesn't make sense. Mishum de b'kirbecha kadosh, there's something holy in your midst. You do good deeds. You're doing ma'asim tovim. Lo avoy be'ir. Hashem will not enter the city. Amalei, Hachi Amar Rav Yochanan. This is how Rav Yochanan explained. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so said HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lo Yaveh b'Yerushalayim Shel Mala. I will not enter the Yerushalayim in the sky, Ad Sheyaveh Yerushalayim Shel Mata, until I enter the earthly Yerushalayim. Until I enter into the earthly Yerushalayim, I will not enter the city of Yerushalayim that's in heaven. Me, Iki Yerushalayim Lamala. Is there such a thing as Yerushalayim Lamala, celestial Yerushalayim? Yes, the Ksiv, Yerushalayim Abenuya, the built up Yerushalayim, Keir Shechubra Lo Yachta, will be like a city which is joined together with it. That means that there's one city connected to another city. So I want to make a point. Everybody, look at the pasuk in Hebrew. Look at the word Yerushalayim. Does anybody notice something about that word? It doesn't say Yerushalayim. It actually says Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim means two Jerusalems. The Navi always writes it without the Yud. Yerushalayim, like Malki Tzedek Melech Sholem, the king of Malki Tzedek, the king of Sholem. Why? In other words, one hand is called a Yad, two hands is called Yadayim, one leg is called Regel, two legs are called Raglayim. So the Navi writes the word Yerushalayim, but how do we pronounce it? Yerushalayim, because we say that there are two Jerusalems. Jerusalem Shalmata, Jerusalem on this earth, Yerushalayim Shalmala, Jerusalem up there, which now explains the great phenomenon that Yerushalayim Eina Min Amida, Jerusalem has no measure. So that when all the Jews came into the Beis Hamikdash, the famous saying, Amdim Tzefufos U'Mishtachvim Rechavim, they stood packed, but when they bowed down to Hashem, miraculously they all got 4 amas. The Aron HaKodesh was 10 by 10. But if that was the case, there was no room in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. But there was always room for the Kohen to go in. How is that possible? Because Eina Min Amida, it does not have measure. And the reason why it doesn't have measure is because Yerushalayim is really Yerushalayim. There's another city interposing on top of Yerushalayim, and our Yerushalayim extends into the other Yerushalayim, and that's why we call the city Yerushalayim, not Yerushalayim. Not like Yad, one hand, but Yadayim, 2 hands. Not like Regel, a foot, but Raglayim, feet. Not Yerushalayim, one city of Sholem, but Yerushalayim, 2 cities of Sholem. Okay? I hope you guys see it. And then now that you see it, you'll notice if you ever look in the Navi and when we read it in the Haftarah, you will see that in the Navi it's never written Yerushalayim. It's actually written like it is over here, Yerushalayim. One city. We pronounce it Yerushalayim because of this pasuk. Yerushalayim abenuyo ki'ir shechuber lo yachdav. Okay, further. On the bottom of 582, why does it say Akas Yivarav Salu Musa Havolim Eitu? What does it mean? That they are altogether senseless and stupid, a rebuke of vanities, each one is wooden. A pasuk in Yirmiyah. In other words, the rebuke is all is vain, and as obtuse as wood. What's going on? Amalei. So Rabbi Yitzchak answered him, Rabbi Yochanan, this is how Rabbi Yochanan explained. There is one transaction that causes the wicked to be burnt in Gehenna. Mahi avodah zara, adultery. We're now on 583. Ksiv hacha, it says over here in Yirmiyah, in Jeremiah, Musar havolim eitzu, a rebuke of vanities, each one is wooden. Ksiv hasam, regarding a little further later regarding adultery, hevel hema maise tatuim. They are vanity, a work of delusion. So you see the word hevel refers to idols and idol worship. Why does it say, Kishtayim rois osa ami? For my nation has committed 2 evils. The Tartan or the Aber, were there evils only 2? The Navi is ignoring the 24 transactions committed by the people of that generation. In Yecheskel, Ezekiel, it lays out the 24 Averis that they did, which correspond, look at the bottom Rashi, the last Rashi on the page before we turned on the page, the last wide line. Gitniya, to be Parshas Hatofas Chof Dalet Averos, in Yecheskel, It labels out 24 sins sha'avru, that they were avru, sha'avru al chov dalet svarim. Because how many books are there in the Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim? How many books are there in the Pentateuch, the prophets, and the writings? Exactly 24 holy books. The 5 books of Moses and the other 19 books of the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim, of the prophets and the writings. They were over on all 24 books. So how could you say only 2? So now, so it says the Gemara, Amalei, Hachi Amar Rav Yochanan, this is Rav Yochanan explained, Achas Shehi, there's one Aveira, now we're on Amid Days, 5b1. 5b1, Shekula Bishnayim, that equals 2. Maninu, which one is this? Avodah Zarah, adultery. Tiksiv, Kishtayim Rois, Seimi. For my people have committed 2 evils. Ami, my people have committed 2 evils. Oisi Ozu Mikar Maim Chayim. They have abandoned me, Hashem, the source of living waters. Lichtzad Lahem, Ba'oiros Mishparet. They have made for themselves citrons, broken citrons. Ksibu, it is written regarding the people in the previous psukim, Ki Ivru Iye Kitiyim Eru'u. For go see the isles of the Kittim and see. V'keder Shulcha V'Yispanyamoid. Send to Keder and consider diligently. Has a nation ever changed their gods, even though they're not gods? It means nations that are serving adultery, right? Nonsense. And have they ever changed them? No. The army, but my nation, my people have changed its glory for which there is no benefit. Tana was taught. Kutim oibrim la'esh, the Kutim worship fire, ukedarim yodrim lamayim, and the Kedarites worshipped water. Even though the Kutim knew that the water extinguishes fire, they didn't change their God to water. The army in my nation, my nation has changed its glory of Hashem to which there is no benefit. So it's doubly offensive. They changed their object of worship, which even the nations never did, who were very idols, and they've changed from the living God, the Kel Chai V'Kayom, to the Avodah Zarahs that have no benefit whatsoever. Why does it say by Shmuel, when Shmuel became old? Did Shmuel ever become old? He was nifter only at 52. He was nifter at 52 years old. If one dies, heaven forbid, at the age of 52, this is the death of Shmuel Aramosi. Amalei, says of Yitzchak, Hachi Amar Rav Yochanan, Ziknach Kopza Olav. Old age came upon Shmuel suddenly. He turned white prematurely. Diksiv, because it says like this. Hashem told Shmuel that Nichamti ki imlachti es Shaul. I regret having made Shaul king. Shaul was told through Shmuel that he should wipe out the entire Amalek. And instead, he did kill out Amalek, but he kept the king alive and he kept its animals alive. And in keeping its animals alive, he meant to bring them. Shaul had all the good intentions of bringing them up as an offering on the altar of Hashem, on the Mizbeach Hashem. And Hashem then said, I regret having made Shaul king. I didn't tell him to bring up offerings. I told him to wipe out Amalek completely. Totally. Wipe them off the face of the earth. The Eibishter didn't want a Holocaust. The Eibishter didn't want Tach V'Tat. The Eibishter didn't want the Inquisition. Hashem didn't want the Crusades, and so on and so on and so on. But we left Amalek alive. So, Amalefanov. So Shmuel said to Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, the master of the universe, Shekaltani ke Moshe v'Aaron. You have equated me, Shmuel, to Moshe and Aaron, amazingly. Tiksiv, Moshe v'Aaron b'kayhanav u'Shmuel b'karei Shemai. We say this Friday night. Moshe and Aaron were among his priests, and Shmuel was the one who invoked his name. Just as the handiwork of Moshe and Aaron did nothing in their lifetimes, because Yeshua, their disciple, who learned first from Moshe, and then when Aaron repeated the laws, learned it from Aaron, survived them. The same should be applied to me, my handiwork, i.e., that I made Shol king, should not pass away while I'm alive. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said, what should I do? What should I do? Lema Shmuel, Lema Shol, let Shol die immediately, like a Shavik Shmuel. Shmuel is not going to allow it. So Lema Shmuel as Zutra, so let Shmuel die young, which will allow me to kill Shol afterwards. Meranani Abasre, people are going to malign Shmuel, saying he did an Aveira so bad that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to kill him early. Loi Lema Shol, Loi Lema Shmuel. So let neither Shol or Shmuel die. Kavari Kia Malchus David. The time for the reign of David to begin has arrived. And this is a famous line in Shas. And the reign of one does not encroach even on the other by a hairbreadth. And this is the reason why one president's term ends on January 20th, 11:59 and 59 seconds. At exactly 12 noon. Not a second before and not a second afterwards, a new president takes over. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Akpitz Alav Zikna. How will I get around this? I will make Shmuel age prematurely. In this way, Shmuel will get old early, okay? Grow his beard will turn white. People will think he's older. And therefore, Shmuel will pass away before Shol without a casting aspersions on Shmuel that he was nifter early. And from here, what do we see over here? Just give me a second. This is what we say. Don't throw me into the elderly years. Now, everybody wants the elderly years. So the answer is, Al Tashlicheni. I want to get old. But don't throw me into the old years. Slowly let me age. Don't let me age in one fell swoop. Because that's what he called. One is a bracha and one is not such a bracha. So says the Gemara, Hainu Diksiv, that's why it says, B'shol Yoshev, the Giva Takas Ha'eshel B'Rama. And Shol was sitting in Giva under the tree in Rama. Right, the Gemara, V'chima in Giva Eitzel Rama. What's the relevance of Giva, which is in the area of Binyamin, and Rama, which is in the mountains of Ephraim? Ella, Allah to teach us, Mi Garam L'Shol Sheyeshe B'Giva Shtei Shana L'Mechza. Who brought about that Shol HaMelech, who was from Binyamin, dwelled in Giva for 2.5 years? Tfilasei Shel Shmuel HaRamasi, the Tfilah of Shmuel the Ramasi. Shol HaMelech reigned over Klal Yisrael for less than 3 years, believe it or not. When we talk about Shol HaMelech, we think he was around for a while. No, he only ruled for a little over 2.5 years. The first thing he was told was to kill out Amalek. He didn't. For all the right reasons, he did the wrong thing. He therefore would have been killed right away by Hashem, but Shmuel davened for him, what we said over here, and Shmuel passed away 2.5 years after the beginning of the reign of Shaul, and Shaul passed away a few months later in an attack against the Philistines. And then David HaMelech took over first in Hebron, I believe, or in Yericho, I don't remember. I think it was in Hebron, and 6 years in Hebron, and afterwards in Yerushalayim. We're now on 5b2. 5b2. Says the Gemara, Zumi mitchi gabra mikame gabra, but is one man pushed aside for the sake of another? Would Hashem brought Shmuel's death purely for the sake of starting David's rule? Says the Gemara, yes, that's the way the world works. My diksiv, why does it say, okay, therefore I have hewn out my word by the prophets, I have killed them with the words of my mouth. It doesn't say that they were killed as a result of their deeds, something that they did wrong. Ella be'imrei fi, with the words of my mouth, to a divine decree. Alma midche gabra mikame gabra. We see that one man will be pushed aside to make way for another. These things happened, that Shmuel was pushed aside in order to make room for David, so that Shaul could die and David can reign in exactly the moment that he was supposed to reign. Rav Nachman Rav Yitzchak Rav Nachman Rav Yitzchak was sitting in a meal. Amalei Rav Nachman Rav Yitzchak Leima Mar Milsa. Rav Nachman said to Rav Yitzchak, let the master say over a shtickle Torah, say over something in Torah. Amalei Rav Yitzchak said to him, Ach Yomer Rav Yochanan. So said Rav Yochanan, Ein masikim besuda. One should not talk during the meal. Shema yaktim kana leveshet. Unless, heaven forbid, the windpipe will precede the esophagus in receiving the food. Don't talk while eating. V'yavi lidei sakana, and you'll come to sakana. Rabbi Yitzchak said, I will tell you shtickle Torah after we eat. So that was the first piece of Torah. The first piece of Torah is don't eat with your mouth full. Okay? Turns out it's Torah. Second, come. Basar the soil, when they finished eating, Jeff likes this. Amalei.
You had said don't eat with your mouth full.
Right.
Should be don't talk with your mouth full.
Don't eat with your mouth full. Don't talk with your mouth full. Yeah, good point. On the other hand, you can argue, don't stuff your mouth.
That's true too. I've been told that before.
Yeah. Amalei. Yaakov Avinu, our father Yaakov, which we're going to be talking about in this week's parasha, Loi Meis, never died. Amalei, v'chibekti, Satku, Sedaino, v'chontu, Chanitai, v'kavro, Kibraya. Was it for nothing that the eulogizers eulogized, and the embalmers embalm him, and the buriers buried him? There's a whole bunch of psukim at the end of Parshas Vayechi that discuss the burial of Yaakov Avinu. So Amalei Mikra Nidarish. I'm darshaning a pasuk. Shenema v'ata al tira abdi Yaakov numa Hashem. And fear not my servant Yaakov, says Hashem. V'al teichas Yisrael, and do not become broken Yisrael. Ki hidini Mashiacha merochai. For behold, I will deliver you from afar. And you seed from the lands of their captivity. In other words, eventually we will be redeemed from this exile. The pasuk draws a connection between Yaakov and his children and his seed, Israel. Just like the seed of Yaakov are living. In other words, we're the eternal nation. Yisrael Nitzchi, we are the eternal nation. Great powers rise and great powers fall, and the only constant in the history of man is one, that the Jew is there to record history. because the Jew is the eternal person, is the eternal people. No matter how much they've tried to destroy us, we have outlasted the 1,000-year Reich, lasted for 12 years. The Jews who were going to be forgotten and destroyed, 6 million of us killed in the concentration camps by the terrible Nazi Germans. We're here and flourishing again. And where are the Nazis? Gone. Where is the Soviet Union that wanted to destroy us, that almost destroyed Soviet Jewry? In Kolzeh, Ma'azar b'chaim, that we're alive. Af hu b'chaim, Yaakov Avinu himself is alive. The easiest way to understand this is to say that Yaakov is alive spiritually. Because here's the thing. We learn from this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayislach, Ma'isa Avos Siman Lebanon. The actions of our forefathers are assigned to the children. How did Yaakov Avinu deal with Esau? Two major things. He gave him presents. He acted humbly in front of Esau, but he also made sure that he lived separately from Esau. He made sure that he didn't commingle with Esau, because that's the Yaakov. In order for us to become Yisrael, eternal, we have to act like Yaakov in the diaspora. Be quiet, deal with things quietly, don't push the envelope, do things incrementally, give them presents, don't stick out.
Steal the Bechoros.
And then, as we're going to learn this week on Friday, as I will be standing out, because here's the great question in this week's Parsha. The whole Parsha, from the beginning till Revi, is a story. Yaakov is deathly afraid of Esau. He sends him presents. He separates out the camp into two camps. He comes, he bows down in front of Esau, and then what happens? Poof! Esau runs over and gives him a hug and a kiss and says, "How you doing? And let's live together." What is that a way to tell a story? Is that a way to tell a story? You got about 50 or 60 psukim of Yaakov being afraid, and then of Yaakov being afraid, and then poof, Esau comes and hugs him, and there's no problem. So what is the reason for this? The answer is, again, you have 50 psukim that of Yaakov being afraid, and Esau all of a sudden comes and hugs Yaakov, and there's no problems. It's like a very deflating end of the story. The answer is, if you look carefully, it's really a Rabbi Sachs. Yaakov gives back the brachas that he stole. The brachas that he stole, what was the brachas that he stole? That you're going to get all of Yita and Lechom, Yishmani Haaretz, you're going to get all this wealth. What are you going to get all this wealth? And your brothers are going to bow down to you. What does Yaakov Avinu do? Yaakov Avinu gives Esau all that wealth, and when Yaakov sees Esau, he bows down to him. In other words, Jerry, Yaakov Avinu gives back the stolen brachas, which explains why for 50 psukim, Yaakov is frightened out of his wits about Esau. And what happens? We get the crescendo of the story. Esau sees Yaakov and he runs over and he gives him a kiss and a hug. And who are all these people? Let's live together, kumbaya. What happened? What happened? That's the way you tell the story? You build it up, and poof. The answer is that Yaakov very cleverly gave back the brachas. He gave him all his wealth, and then he bowed down to him. which if you look back at the brachas that Yitzchak gave Yaakov, that Yaakov stole, what does it say? I'm going to give you from all the wealth, and your brothers are going to bow down to you. Yaakov flipped it around and gave it back to Esau. It's a Rabbi Sachs. And he said, you know why? You're getting a preview of Friday's shoes. What do you call it? You know why? Because he figured out this is what Avraham Avinu did. Avraham Avinu gave a bracha to Yishmael. He'll be rich, and he had a big family, the whole 9 yards. He gave the bris, the covenant of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and children he gave to Yitzchak. The covenant is what Yitzchak passed on to Yaakov. And Yaakov realized the blessings are the blessings that a father gives to a son. The inheritance of the covenant, that belongs to Yaakov. Yaakov turns around and gives back the blessings to Esau. It's a different kind of way of looking at the story, but it explains what happened. Anyways, so let's finish up because it's getting late. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Kol ha'omer rochav miyad mikri. Whoever says rochav will immediately have a seminal discharge. What's going on? Who's rochav? Rochav, when Yeshua sends spies into Yericho to see about it, the 2 spies hid in the house of Rochav, who was a prostitute. Believe it or not, Rochav would eventually marry Yeshua. Rochav and Yeshua became husband and wife. And Rechab was entitled to be one of the 4 most beautiful women ever created, who ever lived. I said Rechab, and nothing happened to me. If you knew her and you were familiar with her, you wouldn't have been able to hold it together. When Rav Yitzchak and Rav Nachman were about to leave each other, Rav Yitzchak was going to leave, Rav Nachman was going to leave Rav Yitzchak. Amalei Rav Nachman, I said to Rav Yitzchak, Livra Chamar, let the Rebbe bench me, bless me. Amalei, so Rav Yitzchak said to him, Emshelacha Mosul, I will tell you a parable. What's it compared to? To a man who's in the desert, who's hungry, tired, and thirsty. Who comes upon a tree whose fruits are sweet and its shade is pleasant, and a stream of water is flowing underneath it. He eats from its fruits, and drinks from its water, and sits in its shade. When he wants to leave, tree, oh tree, how shall I bless you? Shall I say to you that your fruits will be sweet? Your fruits are already sweet. Should I say that your shade should be pleasant? Your shade is pleasant. Should I say that the stream of water will flow beneath you? Why, the stream of water is already flowing beneath you. Ella, and these are famous, it's a song. This whole thing was turned into a song, I think by Yaakov Shweki. He wrote signs, Ella, may it be the will of Hashem that all the shoots that are planted from you, Vavam and Aleph, tomorrow's stop, 681, should be like you. Should be like you, and there's Rashi on top of 681 says, the Torah, for Torah, for rich, to be rich, and to be honored. So Rabbi Yitzchak concluded his words to Rav Nachman. You too, Rav Nachman, what shall I say to you? I bless you with? In the Torah, so I bless you with knowledge of Torah. Hare Torah, you have the knowledge of Torah. With wealth, you have wealth. With children, you have children. Ella, may the offsprings be, may your offsprings be just like you. Very good. We are now on Vavam and Aleph to tomorrow's stop. Very good, and we'll pick it up from Tanu Rabbanim, 4 lines from the top.